Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Purposeful Wisdom Podcast. I am yours truly, Dawn Christine. Thank you guys so much for being here today. For those of you just joining us, welcome. For those of you returning, welcome back. You guys know my objective is to give you all the healing tools in your toolbox, and then whatever you take from it will resonate for you and help you grow on your healing journey. And I have an awesome guest for you guys today. I have with me Mr. Andrew Thorp King. Andrew wears many hats. He's an executive fintech banker, spy novelist, speaker, punk rocker, podcaster, ex-bodybuilder, cigar enthusiast, and serial entrepreneur. Among his ventures, he's the brains behind two indie record labels, Thorp Records and Sailor's Grave Records. His investments span various domains, including online lending, fitness, lead generation, and independent music. But here's the fascinating part, y'all. Andrew Thorp King is no stranger to failure. He's weathered bankruptcy, divorce, mortgage default, public assistance, and numerous business setbacks. However, just like a jack in the box that bounces right back after being hit, he resurfaces each time grinning wide. In his latest book, Failure Rules, The 5 Rules of Failure for Entrepreneurs, Creatives, and Authentics. Thank you. Awesome. I was going to ask you to put that up. Andrew Thorp King shares his invaluable wisdom. He guides you through 5 essential rules to extract valuable lessons from any failure. Drawing from his own life experiences filled with dramatic and cascading failures in business, relationships, art, and life, he will show you the way. Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for that great comprehensive introduction.
Oh, my pleasure. Listen, I want to give my guests the intro they deserve, because I mean, you know, and we were talking off camera a little bit ago before we hit record here, but you know, my definition of failure is just not trying at all. And I feel that so many of us distinguish failure as not getting to the thing that we aim to get to. And I know oftentimes throughout my life thus far, I failed many a freaking time too. And when I tend to look back on it, I had to like reset my mind of thinking, you didn't fail because you tried. And this is just a setback, and it's curving you to your true purpose. So I'd love to dive in and find out what this origin of the 5 rules of failure are.
Yeah, so the origin story really is, and told the story many times, but it's still poignant in my mind every time I recall it. It was towards the end of 2013. I just gone through, or was kind of traveling through, 2 twin consequential failures in my life. I had just gone through a business divorce with one of my partners in an online lending company that I was involved with. We had 2 portfolios, one under a Belize license in that country, one under the state of Delaware, and it was a contentious kind of business divorce breakup. Caused some ruptures in my financial structure, and I had to think through a lot of directional issues and how to kind of recalibrate my life. And I'm taking this beach walk, and I also knew at the time that I was on the precipice of a marital divorce. My marriage was not doing well. I was actually at the beach with my ex-wife at the time, but still I knew that was unraveling, and so there was a lot of tumult going on in my life. I was on the precipice of turning 40, so I was thinking back through my 20s and my 30s and all the different off-road entrepreneurial adventuring that I had done. Everything from starting my 2 record labels to owning a fitness center to doing stuff in online lending to financial planning to owning a lead gen company to bodybuilding competitions to writing a spy novel, all this stuff, right? I'm thinking about what was kind of the cumulative lessons learned through all this, right? What was kind of the energy or the power that allowed me to go, as Winston Churchill talks about, from failure to failure without loss of success, or without loss of enthusiasm, right? That's the definition of success, according to Churchill's quote. And so I'm thinking through all this, and there was just like this, there's almost like this conviction that came upon me that, I was called to write this book on the value of failure, right? And to synthesize all these inputs and inspirations, these virtual mentors, all the specific quotes or themes or concepts that really, buoyed me through hard times and failures to get to that next best step. I was listening to music at the time. Music is huge for me. Obviously, like I listen to hardcore and punk rock, and I listen to all kinds of music, but that's like the main thrust, right? That's the stuff that energizes me, animates me, and really catapults me through difficult times and gives me strength. So I was listening to, Motorhead and Cro-Mags, the song Hard Times. That really hit me. Little did I know 7 years later, when the book was done, that the lead singer for the Cro-Mags, John Joseph, who's also a triathlete, Hare Krishna devotee, author of many books, that he would actually write the foreword to the book, which was awesome. Also he's a frequent Joe Rogan guest. And so little did I know that, but I synthesized all this. I had one digital sticky note with some rough ideas, just some phrases here and there that blossomed over the years, from draft to draft, iteration to iteration, before I turned the book into the editing team at Scribe Media. That was probably sometime 2021. And there's a year and a half of going back and forth and really refining it, taking it from good to what I think is a great manuscript. And that's really the origin story. Obviously, there's a whole lot embedded within the book, both my own stories, layered in with a wide array of case studies of both known and unknown, famous and emerging people from different spaces to bolster the lessons attached to each chapter and the overarching rules that kind of coagulate each set of chapters.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And to like have it go full circle that he got to forward your book. I mean, that probably definitely hit home for you. Like, whoa, like your music helped me through some of the roughest patches in my life. And now to get recognized and be like, hey, this book is awesome. And not only is it awesome, I'm going to forward your book. I mean, what a full circle experience for you.
Yeah, I mean that was really amazing, right? And even like the story on how I got him to write the forward was a lesson in perseverance and what I call or what Alex Banayan calls the third door, right? So Alex Banayan wrote this book, The Third Door, and it's about the idea that when you're going after something, right, there's really kind of three ways to go after it. There's the front door, which is for those that have to kind of wait in line with the great unwashed and wait their turn and try to get into an opportunity. There's the back door for the privileged and the connected, where they get in easily, and then there's the third door for those that are creative and circumventive, that have to find a way to run down the alley and bang on the window and get somebody to pay attention to get an opportunity. It was really the third door that I took to even get John Joseph to write it forward. I reached out to him several times, didn't hear anything back. Doesn't know me, but we have some common friends, some bands I've worked with that he's friends with in the New York hardcore punk scene. And so he was doing this walking tour in New York that he does every year, once or twice a year, called the Fierce City Tour, where he takes a walk through the Lower East Side, which is now gentrified, but he talks about the old crazy stories of street life and punk rock when he was growing up there, and how he was, homeless at the time and dealing with drug addiction, and all these things, and all these really wild stories. He gives a history of it. And so I went and booked a train ticket to New York and went on his walking tour, him not knowing that I'm standing there. I'm the guy that's been emailing him. And then afterwards, I came up and talked to him and told him who I was. He's like, "Oh, you emailed me." I'm like, "Yeah." And I told him about the book and my plans, and then he agreed to write the forward. So like, I had to go out of my way, as Stephen Pressfield, the author, puts it in his book, "Put your ass where your heart is." I had to go put my ass where my heart was and find a way to get connected with him to try to convince him to write the forward. Right. So it's like, that's the story of my life. It's taking that third door, as Alex Banayan talks about, and finding these circuitous ways to bring my dreams into reality as best I can, and to follow that authentic path and kind of go the hard way.
Oh my gosh. And for many of us too, we've also understood, at least for me too, it's when there's not a door, make one. Because it's, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to go after the things that fire you, that just fire your soul, and that you're so passionate about? And most times you're right about that. If you are privileged enough to know the right people, because I feel that in today's society, a lot of it reflects of who you know, not what you know, right?
Yep.
And that's just how I see life to be. But I think also another way to look at it is, if there isn't a door, create it. Create your own door. You know what I'm saying? And I know that in your bio, you talk a lot about how spirituality, along with music, played a huge role in this. So how did you pull yourself up when all of this chaos was going on in your life, and you look at your life and like, oh my gosh, I failed at this, I failed at that. How did you turn that mindset over to, well, I didn't really fail. It just put me on the trajectory of what I was actually meant to do.
That's interesting, right? So I do have a definition of terms in the book, and I kind of redefine, what both success and what failure is, right? And so I define success not in so much a worldly material, sense, although that's great and awesome byproduct of any sort of pursuit if you're able to have that type of success. But I define success more as, doing your best or successfully aligning with your true authentic calling journey, which means that you're able to identify and maximize the use of your unique uh, talent stack composite to impact the world. Right. So that may result in money, may result in material success, may placely firm you into discomfort and risk and isolation. It could do either of those things.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
But if it's for that higher impact, then you're aligned with your kind of calling journey that's authentic. And that to me is the definition of success. And then the definition of failure, similarly, is very broad and very general. And in my definition of failure, I talk about how sometimes a failure event can actually paradoxically really be the very thing that came into your life that aligns you with your calling journey and ends up defining your success in relation to you living out your calling journey authentically and maximally. So it's a very paradoxical kind of way of thinking. It's the idea, like, failure rule number one is failure purifies. It's the idea that the phoenix must burn to emerge, and that when you have failure events, you need to decouple your identity from those failure events the best you can. It's difficult. It's easy to be emotional in those times. And certainly I have, for a period, but you have to extract yourself, be a third party observer of what you're going through, and find a way to see, to leverage the chaos of the moment so that the chaos doesn't just confront you and hit you and knock you down, but that you see it coming. You're able to kind of step aside, take the power of that chaos and shape it to your benefit, shape it to a way that it can transform you into your next reinvented self, that might open you up to elements of yourself that you didn't know were there, interests that you didn't know were there, turn you into that multidimensional being that makes you more wise, more useful, and more interesting as you move forward into the next chapter of your life.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And realistically, for me too, it's all about how, I always say, even to my kids, it's not, sometimes things happen for us, not to us. And it's how we actually, address the issue in our lives, because we can go down this pity party, which most of us do. We're human. We're going to
Sure.
go through all of the emotions. We're going to sit back and reflect and wonder why, and have our pity party at the moment. That's just the way life is. But it's what you take with it. What lessons have you learned from life? What can you do? Because you have two choices. You could either soak in the misery, or you can rise and learn the lesson and then tweak your approach and then try again. Because I feel that as long as you're trying, you're not failing. You're just learning. You're learning more and more. You're putting more tools into your toolbox. And if you are passionate about something that you know within your soul is what you are on that right path for, you're going to pursue it no matter what. And like I said, create that door if there's no door available for you. So I think it's about resilience, persistence, determination, and passion. I think passion is what drives the successful people to what they have, because they never gave up. They always found the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a couple of things there. So, I write a chapter in the book called, the failure rule number 5 is you are not your failures. And there's a chapter called You Are Not Your Failures, but You Are How You Respond to Your Failures. Right. And that's what we're talking about. It's aligned to the old Stoicism idea that, events aren't good or bad. It's how you respond to them. Right. And so, I kind of chronicle the story of Job, the biblical story, whether you believe that's to be the word of God or whatever you believe it is. It still kind of illustrates that idea that you have a choice, even in the horror of the circumstances, cataloged in that narrative, to figure out how you're going to decide to respond to it, right? And it's that way, I think, for all failures, whether they're ethical failures, whether they're business failures, whether they're failures that are a result of your own decision-making gap, or whether they're a result of just living in an unsafe world, whether it's market conditions or war or famine or pandemic, whatever it is, failures in this broken unsafe world will occur and will affect you as you travel through it, no matter how smart you are, no matter how clever you are, no matter how careful you are, right? And so it really
Absolutely.
is about detaching from all of that and trying to find that inner kind of spiritual strength where you see yourself as a soul that has a body, not a body that has a soul. And it's
Right.
that drives you, where you're able to transcend circumstances and step back and have that surplus of solitude to be able to reimagine your next self and what that might look like, and find a way to speak that into the world through your actions, step by step, in a strategic and thoughtful way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And I love the fact, you mentioned before how music was such a big part of your healing journey, because it is for me too. Whatever mood I'm in, if I need to energize, I'll go to certain music. And if I need
Yeah.
to do some soul searching, it's the same thing. So how has music and what influencers has come into your life to help you through all these things?
Yeah. So at the time I mentioned, where I was talking about I was going through those twin failures, where I had just gone through this business divorce and I was on the precipice of marital divorce. That then occurred, and I found myself, after being a long seasoned self-employed entrepreneur and a long married person, all of a sudden, that dynamic began to change. And I was living in a hotel room, and I had no office to go to by day, no home to go to by night. I was temporarily, separated from my children during that time, and I could have wallowed in despair. I could have, attached myself to the optics of failure. I could have, just relegated myself to misery. But there's this song by the metal band Hatebreed. It's one of my favorite bands. The song's called "Divinity of Purpose." And there was something about the power of that song, the arrangement of the music with the lyrics, that ended up just really striking me and hitting me and buoying me. And I'll read the lyrics here. The lyrics are: I felt the pain of discipline was less than that of regret, lifted 1 foot from the grave when the purpose showed its face, and when the skies crashed down upon me, I looked for someone by my side. You were there when no one else was. You showed me what's born doesn't always die, the divinity of purpose. And so it was this concept of the divinity of purpose that was really like this endorphin through the pain and the confusion. And so in that time, I was able to kind of manifest reinvention on multiple fronts, living in this hotel room, going through this divorce, having been kind of exiled from this one business relationship. And in that time, I ended up utilizing my skills in the online lending business to become a consultant, quickly replace my income there by consulting. That then kind of transitioned into a proper partnership in a lead generation company that was lucrative for a while. I also revived my record labels and released 5 or 6 different records, secured capital, and did that. I also then shaped up my resume to end up getting a job in the corporate world as a fintech banker in the payment space, which I still am today, 10 years later, multiple promotions since then, which was pretty astonishing, from going online lending, which is kind of more a different space, and was almost like, in some ways, going from being like a porn star to a regular actor. So it was like a big deal. And I also, at that time, finished my first spy novel, and I began the manuscript for Failure Rules. So like 5 new threads were born out of this failure space. So it's the idea that in failure spaces, there's a beauty in that emptiness where everything's wide open, and you can totally whole cloth
Yes.
recreate things if you look at it that way. If you just see it as empty, so you lost everything, well, then that's going to be a problem. But if you're able to see that as like the opportunity in that chaos, the opportunity in that emptiness, the multiple ways that you can resketch your life, there's so much power in that. And so that was an example of how that song and that concept of Divinity of Purpose, which I write about in the book, buoyed me towards that time and really helped to birth these multiple threads that over time, with different timelines, bore great fruit and really have kind of enhanced the narrative and the fulfillment of my life.
Oh my gosh. And it's fascinating because I heard one line stuck out to me in the song. It said, "You were by my side." And it made me think of our higher selves.
Yes.
Because sometimes when you are alone going through something so traumatic, because loss is traumatic, no matter how you look at, whether it's business, whether it's relationships, whether it's friendships, it could be anything. Loss is traumatic. And I almost feel like he's talking about your higher self, like in the midst of everything, you connected to your higher self, and now here lies beneath a blank canvas. And now
Yes.
you have the knowledge and the ability and the resilience to co-create with your higher self anything.
Yes.
And look what you did. You're going down 5 different business avenues all at the same time. And I understand that because I'm doing the same thing right now. I got like I have like my hand in multiple cookie jars right now. I'm in the middle of writing a book, actually 2. I'm doing the podcast, I'm coaching, like, but it's all parts of ourselves that not only are we doing because we're aligned with our purpose, but it's also so healing. It's so
Yes.
healing to be vulnerable and show our authentic selves to others. And when you understand that you're not alone, that there are others like you out there that have been through the kinds of struggles, through the heartaches, you find your sense of community too. Was I right about incorporating that song? I'm just curious.
100%, 100%. I mean, the line before that is when the skies crash down upon me. This is this idea
Right.
that's everything's falling apart, everything's falling on you. You're devastated, you're empty, everything's been just emptied in your life. But you were there. The divinity of purpose showed its face. And it's the idea that within that, there's this inner strength, there's so much supernatural power that can energize you, help you make sense of it all, see the path or multiple paths that you need to now invoke, that only really can really be energized and activated sometimes in that empty space, right? Like
Right.
sometimes when our life has so much structure, we don't have the clarity or the incentive to even see what the possibilities might be because
Right.
we got tracks. The tracks are rolling
Right.
on the train and we already
Yep.
have the infrastructure of our life. Everything's just going smooth and everything's going to plan. We might even be numb inside sometimes, lost a little passion, lost a little of the energy, but it's comfortable and it's good. It's only sometimes when things are shattered, when things are
Yeah.
completely blown apart, that we actually can discover or have the wisdom, if we're able to energize and recreate something that ultimately is better for us, better for the
Yep.
world, better for the impact we can have. And it's that idea. And it's, to me, it is a supernatural thing. Whatever you believe about spirituality or
Oh
God or
yeah.
whatever it is, for me, that's what it is. And that was the force that fell upon me and activated me and helped me get up and to move forward and reinvent.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say that because I feel that sometimes in our lives, when we're in the rut of things and we don't have time to just be, it takes something catastrophic to stop us in our tracks
Yes,
and go,
yes,
hello, wake up, you're on the wrong path. And it takes losing everything to make you stop. It's this force that, or like, it's like, okay, I have to strip you of everything
yes,
basically to make you stop for once and reflect and just be whatever that looks like and actually think about your life. And that shift, because we're humans, we're stubborn. We
yes,
discredit our feelings. We tend to shove down our stuff and we tend to ignore that inner voice in ourselves that's literally screaming in our ear, you're going on the wrong path. We tend to say, shut up and not listen to
yes,
it. And it oftentimes finds us where the universe is going to smack us in the face until we actually understand, no matter how much you push, change is coming. And of course, we as humans, we don't like change. Change is uncomfortable. But I often find myself even telling my own clients, like, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable sometimes because that's where you grow. That's where you really thrive because the unknown is scary. We're humans. We like comfort and we tend to stay in our comfort zone sometimes, even when it doesn't feel right, because the unknown is scary. What would you say to people that are in this situation right now that are struggling to find their purpose, maybe have lost a lot of things in their life? What would you say to motivate them to get their mindset straight to finding their purpose and getting on the right path?
Well, I think it goes back to what you're talking about is that inner voice that you reference, right? Sometimes it does take catastrophic events or extreme disruptions or even mild disruptions to shake us, to even give us the space where we're forced to listen to it because we have to in order to find a pathway forward. But obviously, it's more ideal to regularly set aside time where we
Yeah.
force ourselves to listen to that voice and find a way to hear it with clarity. So it's not muzzled by the comfort in our lives. It's not muzzled by the routines that we built that we think ought to stay forever, which might only be there for a season, for a reason, right? So it's this idea, I call it the internal spirit voice. It's defined in the book. I'll read the definition here. So I define the internal spirit voice as this. The term internal spirit voice is used prolifically throughout this text and is core to the understanding of the 5 rules of failure. The term is used to attempt to describe the elusive, ethereal voice within all of us that guides us through consequential decision points related to our calling journey. I believe we all have an internal spirit voice beckoning us to listen to its urgings in moments of high and low stakes decision making. The nature and source of the internal spirit voice is something for everyone to attempt to trace. For me, I recognize it as an expression of the divine that is installed uniquely within each of us at our origin, at our origination in the womb. So it's the idea that like that voice is important. Whatever you call it, whatever different people groups or cultures or individuals call it at a given time, you could call it your gut, you could call it your conscience, you could call it your heart, you could call it whatever. You could call it the spirit. If you're a Star Wars fan, it's the Force. I mean, whatever you call it, right? Like we have it in us. Like people know what you're talking about when you mention that. And you might not always be able to recognize it, but you know when you're ignoring it because your life's just not working. And
because it gets louder.
Yeah, it gets louder. It's screaming
because
you're numb, you're not listening to it, and you're ignoring it, and things are not going well, and you're off the path. And so for me, it is that surplus of solitude, even when it's very uncomfortable, to make sure I force myself to give space in my life, whether it's taking a walk in nature, whether it's, lifting weights or sitting in my hot tub smoking a cigar, whatever it is. I have to build in that isolation time to hear that voice because there's a lot of inputs. There's a lot of moving pieces in life, as much as we talk about stillness, which stillness is important. Even within stillness, we're aware of all the motion in life, even in our own head, the motion of different forces that could change our circumstances or shape our circumstances, or the different motion that we could invoke to do the same. And you have to constantly process that with intelligence. And I would suggest even with a sense of spirituality in order to constantly recalibrate with what might be your calling journey so you're on the right path to uniquely give the world what you were created to give it.
Absolutely. What would you say about fear in all of this? Because, obviously fear is a big part of change. And there's a lot of us that, obviously it not only affects our minds, it affects our bodies. We start to get sick. We start to lose our energy. What would you say about fear? How can people overcome this unknownness and a lot of us just give into fear and it scares us to the point where sometimes we don't even follow the path that we're meant to be on. We stay stuck.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
I mean, fear is a warning sign. It's a warning signal, right? Like it has its utility. We're not supposed to stay in it. We're not supposed to live in it, but we are supposed to pay attention to it. And the antidote to fear is always faith, right? I mean, that is always the antidote, and faith requires action, right? So it goes back to that me sitting in that hotel room and that phrase "divinity of purpose," which was like the faith antidote that countered the fear of the moment, of the emptiness, of the the disassembly of my life that I was experiencing. And so that faith then naturally led to action, which was those 5 threads that were birthed during that time. And so it's finding a way to connect to that, whatever that faith component might be in your life that can counter that fear. I mean, they are opposite forces, right? One cures the other. And to me, that's just truth.
Oh my gosh. What would you say to people that have failed? How should they use that as leverage? What would be the next step for someone that they've lost everything and they're trying to figure out their way and they can't seem to leverage that failure to turn it into purpose? What would you say about that?
I think it goes back to the idea that you have to find a way to step outside the emotionality of a circumstance, and leverage that chaos as an idea engine, and see what's really happening, and take inventory of your entire life. And oftentimes when things are failing or things fall apart, there's a reason. Old foundations needed to dissolve for new ones to be formed. What's the new ones that need to be formed? Go on that journey, explore what that might be. Old thinking needs to die so that new thinking can flourish. What's new thinking that you need to embrace? What you need to be more open to that you were closed to in the past? I think if you go down those roads, you're going to find the breadcrumbs that will lead you to the formation of your next chapter.
I agree with that too. I think going within, a lot of us tend to look for outside sources and outside answers to things. And I often say on this platform that the answers are within us. And in a moment of stillness and solitude, if we just listen and we reflect, a lot of times we will hear what we're meant to hear. And when things are happening to us too, we often ask that question, why? And I feel sometimes in the moment you don't get the answers. I've found personally that years later, when I look back on my life, I understand why. I understand why I had to cross bridges that were burned behind me, so to speak. I found to understand the why behind the why. Not only to understand my own resilience and how much of a badass I am and strong and capable.
Yeah.
I'm also understanding that, being a role model for my kids and showing them that if you put your mind to anything, you could accomplish anything, because thoughts become things. And it goes back to that question of how serious and how bad do you want it? And it's aligning that passion and that purpose together. And once you realize that, the world is your oyster.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely a huge part of it. I mean, it's, in that emptiness or in that solitude, if you're able to separate yourself from your circumstances, it's the listening, it's the stillness. Like, it doesn't come at once. Like, to even hear that internal spirit voice that I reference, it's not always clear. It's not always like an end-to-end narrative that's just downloaded right to you where you now have instructions on what to do next. You have to piece it together. You have to embrace the mystery. You have to embrace the tumult of it all, right? You have to be comfortable with tumult, and see that as an adventure and see that as a character building gift to you, as well as just kind of a curious thing to experience. And it's kind of like dispensing with the idea of valorizing stability. It's dispensing with the idea that life is supposed to be perfect. I mean, I talk about the Japanese term wabi-sabi in the book, which is the beauty of imperfection, or as rocker David Lee Roth calls it, it's perfect because it's a little effed up, and I think that's really like, it's seeing the beauty in the imperfection in life and knowing that it is the sometimes the hardships or the challenges of the journey that can give you that energy and help you to really feel alive,
Oh yeah.
and to discover the multiple purposes that you're meant to embrace and encounter throughout your life.
I agree with that. And a lot of times too, you hear a lot about societal norms, especially like looking back, and I can look back 20 years ago in my 20s and be like, I should have been here by now and I should have done this by now. And I've come to learn that age has nothing to do with this. There's so many times in my life where I've reinvented myself. And I'm sure I'm going to be reinventing myself now that I'm in my 40s, and I am, but it's all these chapters in your life. Like, I feel that the societal norms shouldn't be part of discovering who you are, and listening to that noise,
Yeah.
it just blocks your true potential, because I feel that a lot of us go by titles. I am this, I
Yeah.
am that. And I feel that there's a way that we could be many things. We could have many titles. I mean, look at you. You have 6,000 different titles of what you've done, what you are doing. But that's the beauty of it, I think, Andrew. I really feel that we're limiting ourselves to titles. We can be many things and have many different characteristics of our personality shine through many things that we want to learn, create, dip our hands into the cookie jar, so to speak. So I feel like shouldn't even be a factor in this. You can reinvent yourself. You can discover your purpose at any age at any
Yeah.
time in your life, what would you say to that? Especially like both of us are pretty much around the same age, so to speak, and we're both reinventing ourselves here and figuring things out. And I'm sure we still have more to figure out. What would you say to those 20-year-olds right now that are freaking out because they haven't
Yeah.
found their purpose in life yet?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to this fallacy of trying to plan for a linear career or a linear life. It goes back to like the arrival fallacy that when this happens or when I achieve this, then I'll be set. And none of that's ever true.
No.
Yes, you can attain certain achievements in your life or statuses in your life that will increase your happiness, that can increase your happiness, can increase your stability. All those things can be good. But there's a lot of value along the way in the lessons in the instability. There's a lot of value along the way in the lessons of even the confusion and how that confusion can force you to think broadly, to think in a multi-dimensional manner, right? I talk about a portfolio pursuits mentality in the book, which is the idea that, try to cultivate a portfolio of pursuits, be an octopus, not a fish. If one tentacle is severed, you have seven more to swim with, constantly recalibrate them. And it's the idea that, similar to like diversifying your savings and investments, the same concept, do the same thing with your pursuits and your interests, because then you'll be a broader human being. Don't ever over identify with one pursuit, one interest. Be committed, be passionate, go after them. It can be a part of your identity, but only softly identify, because it might end up being minimized over time and something else might emerge. And you
Right.
might intentionally minimize it because something else becomes more valuable and more aligned with the next step in your calling journey. And it's constantly recalibrating this portfolio of interests and pursuits and manifestations of your personality and your usefulness in the world, which leads to two things. It can lead to a more interesting and potentially stable and diverse financial life. It could lead to multiple income streams, or just a more diverse resume that makes you more marketable and remarketable in the world as the world changes and as you change. And it also can lead to just a more predictable sense of fulfillment, because if you got 5 or 6 things that you're involved in, some might be monetized, some might not be, but like you always have something else to kind of pivot to. If one area of your life produces a lot of money but not a lot of meaning, you might have another area of your life that you're building that produces a ton of meaning but not a lot of money or no money at all. And if you have 2 or 3 spread throughout both of those areas on the overall aggregate composite, you can find a way to build to as close as possible to 100% in both the fulfillment and meaning categories, as well as the money. So it's the idea of trying to marry money and meaning through a portfolio pursuits composite building
Right.
approach.
No, I agree with that too. And you said something interesting just before about, we get to our outcome, we get to that goal, and we think, yeah, I finally achieved it. But what I've often found, and so many people I've talked to, some even my clients, when they get to it, they
Yeah.
realize they want more. And to me, that's awesome, because if you reach that goal and you're like, okay, I've achieved it, it's done, I'm here. Oftentimes, the next question that comes up is, now what?
That's right.
Because you can't stay stagnant. You have to keep growing. So even though you get to your goal, we as humans, we always want more. And it's often, reflected into society as, well, that's being greedy. That's wanting everything. But why not? Like, we are light beings in human form. We are capable of so much. We can do so much more than we even allow ourselves to even
Yeah.
comprehend. So if we're constantly growing and constant revolving, setting goals is not the end of the line, because you're always going to be evolving into making new goals, the new now what, right? So what would you
Yes.
say for people, and this will be my, we'll wrap it up here. What would you say to people that have hit their goals and now they're in that stage of, well, now what do I do? What would you say for people that are in that stage of their life?
Well, at that point, I wouldn't say it's too late, but it becomes a little more difficult. But from a preemptive standpoint, I would say, and prior to getting there, try to think about multiple goals, but even moreover, just multiple areas of alignment, interest, and desire that fit your disposition in the world uniquely, and be in it for it. It goes back to Simon Sinek's infinite game theory, which is the goal is not to win the game. It's to find a way to stay in the game as long as possible because you just love playing the game. And so play many games and try to find a way to stay in many games all at once and enjoy the ride. Don't be exhaustive about it where you have to go rush to get this goal and achieve this. Enjoy the ride. Doesn't mean that you're not aggressive, doesn't mean you don't set milestones, doesn't mean you don't look at goals. But the real goal really is just to stay in the game and enjoy the game. So what is necessary to stay in the game? I mean, for instance, writing this book, like it's not a matter of like, oh no, if I don't sell X amount of copies in a year, then it's a failure. It's like, no, the goal is to stay in the game. The goal is to continue to be in a position where I can talk about these ideas in many different formats, many different people, in many different spaces. So guess what? That's already happening. So now the goal is just to stay in the game. You know,
Right.
the sales of the book is just a byproduct. The other opportunities
Right.
that might come, speaking or whatever, is just a byproduct. So it's finding the right game and having the goal to stay in the game, which means that it doesn't really end, right? And
Right.
play many. Because some games might end, against your will, and you have to have other ones to pivot to. It goes back to not over-identifying with one pursuit, but still being passionate about them. And so I think it's just a mindset shift of not being accomplishment-oriented, but just being immersion-oriented. Like, how do I immerse myself in this activity so I can enjoy the process of that activity for as long as possible, for as long as it's needed?
That's the key. It's enjoying it. It's being in the moment. We often just kind of just run through life like we got to go, we got to go. And we often just really don't, we're not present in that moment. We don't really understand and actually just be in the moment and live the experience because life is about experiences.
Yep.
Andrew, thank you so much. This was so awesome. I just can't thank you enough. Please, for my viewers that are listening while driving and not actually viewing this video, please let my viewers know how they can contact you, what your website is, so that if people need to reach out to you, how can they?
Sure. So the book again is Failure Rules with an exclamation mark, kind of a fist in the air proclamation. Subtitle is The 5 Rules of Failure for Entrepreneurs, Creatives, and Authentics. You can find it anywhere you consume books online. It's a great audiobook as well, read by J.S. Sang, the actor from the show Twin Peaks on Showtime. Does justice to the text in a great way, really urgent cadence. You can find me at andrewthorpking.com, no E on the end of Thorpe. There you can get a free Failure Rules mini course. You can find my soundtrack playlist, which is a companion to the book, all the songs I actually listen to during these times that I write about or while writing the book. And you can follow me on Instagram at Andrew Thorp King, no E in the end of Thorpe. Yeah, check it out.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate it. And guys, thank you so much for joining me again. Like I said, if you guys need to reach out to Andrew, I'll have all his information into the description box. My information will be in there also. And until we meet again, folks, love you guys. I will see you on the next episode. Be well.